Hello and welcome to episode number 230 Armin Show podcast. We are in the place to be. We have the author of this book, A Liberated Mind, How to Pivot Toward What Matters, Stephen C. Hayes, PhD, the originator of acceptance and commitment therapy. Welcome to the show.
I'm really glad to be here. Looking forward to it.
This is a great thing. I would like to describe part of your biography because it's prolific, okay? I noticed prolific nature, and it has it. So you have written 44 books and nearly 600 scientific articles. Are these things true?
There are low estimates because that must be a year ago. But other than that,
Right.
whenever I hear those statistics, I hear, get a life, dude. What?
Come on, Stephen C. Hayes. Just unbelievable. That's kind of funny. I always heavily notice prolific nature or doing a lot in the category because I feel like you can only be really good at something when you're touching it at all angles, at all times. Nobody can compete with the person who's doing the most in a category. You just can't. You can't just show up and outdo somebody who's tried this, checked this, got the response from this. It's impossible. So I kind of like that.
You're actually the first person to actually say that in an interaction I've had, a person who does this kind of work and stuff. And I've always believed that's true. I tell my students that. I say, 10,000 hours, that can put you in the expert category. 10,000 hours of doing something. This is Anders Ericsson's work. You probably heard that rule. But that just gets you in the game. And do the math, dude. You're not going to be, God's gift. You're coming out of the gate. You're going to have to slog. And well, maybe that's the wrong way to say it. You have to care for a long time.
Yeah.
That's better.
Right. Where your care goes, that's the only place that can be something. People connect with care. That's all they can connect with. And if you bring it in some category, then they can connect with a little bit, some percentage lower than what you brought to that.
Yeah. I really believe that. And I hope, maybe, you and I would love to, when you started out, you started listening to how many podcasts. And, my thought was exactly the same thing. We've never talked together, have we? But I'm going like, okay, this guy is going to be good because he's done the work.
Right. Good point, by the way, there, as far as my podcast, it had certain theme. The first 100 was more of me discussing and like messages like I put out many years ago. I had a personal development podcast in 2008, 9, 10, 11. And then some people I knew. And then the second 100 is more or less people I knew and some people I had met in public and or some figures that were cool to talk to. And then now it's more individuals who are about something, have a message, and are saying something.
Yeah. I'm a little worried. I'm jumping ahead even, but people hearing it, if you're a young person and you're really thinking about it, you're thinking like, oh man, yeah. But part of what's actually in this book and what's maybe in our conversation is how you go from a place where you're not expert yet, but you care about something deeply. And you want to do something. You're almost even afraid to say it out loud because you know that's a weight to lift, But if you can kind of get out of your way and channel that energy, life unfolds. Things start happening. Things are moving forward. And, you don't get to be at your 200 podcast without that little kind of core motivation, caring, etc. I'm tired. I don't want to do it, but yeah, okay. And it moves you forward. So maybe it turns out a liberated mind is all about that. So it's a really easy thing to talk about.
Right. But it goes straight to that. Yeah, that's true. By the way, if you're doing something and you're not really into it, within like the 10th time you were going to do it and somebody turned you down for something and you just, I give up. Or something in your life happened and it was a difficulty and you're like, I need a few weeks to just take a break, and you stop doing it, you're done. There's so many different things that'll just, if you don't have your own flow to it, you have no chance.
Exactly. I tell a story in A Liberated Mind about teaching guitar. It's with my hands growing arthritic, it's falling away, but I love guitar. I play guitar, and I've taught, 30 people how to play guitar. And what I put in there is that I can predict who's going to really be good. And it's the people who enjoy being bad. Because at the beginning, you're bad. Right. And if people come in and they're talking about, their rock star dreams or something, I'm going like, oh man, you're not even going to be able to learn it. What are you doing? You have to really enjoy making that little sound that other people might run from the room listening to. Actually, in the book, I tell the story of me starting with the ukulele, and I
Yeah.
knew only one song, which was "Ain't She Sweet," and I played it for like a month, and people would like just run. He's coming. He's playing that god awful song. Would you stop? You know, but there's something in there of creating a space in which you can enjoy a process that is where you are, not where you're not. And in that process, you'll move into that place where you're not yet. And you
Hmm.
just keep doing that and doing that and doing that. And at the edge, you're always entertaining yourself and having fun, and you're getting better. But how do you do that? How do you get out of your own way in such a way that you can connect in with what, after all, when you jumped out of the womb, you're like within hours, you're trying to reach for things, and you're like spending hours and hours just, grasping, looking, turning your head at stuff and being entertained by it. And if you didn't, you'd never be able to like grab things and move them towards you. You have no idea how long that took to learn that, or to control your eyes, or lift up your head, or to walk, or to, but somehow or another we get our mind going, and then we lose that energy, and then we're like want to spring forth from the head of Zeus and be expert. Good luck at that. The last time I checked, we're not springing forth from the head of gods. We're learning one step at a time, and better enjoy it, or you're not going to learn it.
To follow up on that, yes, I've noticed that, yeah, if someone cannot handle the difficult portions, I know they have no chance of being an expert in that category. And if they have to almost, it's their reaction to that difficult part. If they're saying like, no, no, I wouldn't even deal with that, or that somehow they're like, no, I need at least this, then I just know that category is not their category.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And how does that happen? How do you get in your own way? Because sometimes people actually say they want to acquire that expertise, but it's just not there. They're getting in their own way.
Hmm. One one thing that came to mind. So I always like how books are broken up into sections. You have your part one, part two, and the part two has the pivots along the way,
Yeah.
and then part three is using the toolkit. In the part one thing I identify with, why our thoughts are so automatic and convincing. Can you speak a little bit about automatic thoughts that people run through that they're not even aware of, and it's happening all day?
Oh yeah. In fact, the not even aware of part is a really cool story, and I originally had more in the book on it because I wanted people to understand how hopeless it is that you're going to like get all your thoughts lined up in a row. I mean, when you're asleep, they're doing their work. They're like a spider just doing its work, and you can notice it, but you can't really fully control it. What you can do is put it on a leash or not. Well, what's happening here, really, in my opinion, is we've got a kind of evolutionary mismatch. You know, if you do something like, let's say you have some sort of direct conditioning, like you see something and something painful happens. The next time you see it, you're like, oh, that process is 500,000,000 years old. How do we know that? Every single organism that evolved since the Cambrian period, 545 million years ago, does that. Every one. And before that, none of them. Okay, so it's a real clear dividing line. Boom. Operant classical conditioning, if you know the sort of Psych 101 words for it.
Mm-hmm.
Learning by association or contingencies, you want to talk that way. Learning by experience directly, you want to talk it that way. You don't need to go technical on it.
Mm-hmm.
Sponges don't do it, jellyfish don't do it, but everything else. But what you and I are doing is only 2 million years old, 3 million years old, maybe 300,000 years old, because we don't know. Homo sapiens, for sure. Hominins, we don't know. We're not sure. We know that the chimpanzees don't. I mean, in controlled studies, chimpanzees, and I can explain what we're doing here. I can get it down because that's part of what's in the book.
Mm-hmm.
Is when I kind of walk through my own suffering, my own anxiety disorder, et cetera, and working how to solve that. Instead of running right out saying, hey, I've got a method to teach people to, I spent 16 years working on what is the basic processes that explain that. In part because where I ended up was sort of saying things that sort of sounded like things monks would say. And I said, God, the last thing you need is another freaking scientist out there, going Om. I mean, no, I mean, it's fine, but it's already on the planet. What can I bring to that's, And what we discovered, I think actually is the word, is that this thing you and I are doing is an evolutionarily recent process that probably started with cooperation, and because we're the cooperative species, we're the tribal primates. If you didn't cooperate, you die. I mean, you're the isolated monkey, you're the dead monkey in Homo sapiens or hominid world. But we had learned to extend cooperation. Hey, could you bring me an apple? Yeah, I'll bring an apple. That two-way street of, if you have an object that has a name, cell phone, even 12-month-old babies, you then say the name, they look around, try to find the object. Chimpanzees don't do that. Language trained chimpanzees don't do that. Your dog doesn't do that. Please don't send me a little email about your smart dog. I know you got a smart dog, but you have to teach them both directions. They don't derive it in a two-way street. And infants don't do it either till about 12 months old. But once they do, then it isn't just names, it's also different. If I say, where's the metronome? You never heard that. You look around, you find the one object, you don't know what the hell that's named. You'll derive that's probably a metronome. That's around 16 months. Well, and then it goes into opposites and comparisons and before and after. And then when you get just a little bit farther along, then you can do something like, if I did this, I'd get that outcome. But if I did that, I'd get this outcome. And that outcome's better than this. In your head, not by trial and error.
Right.
Now we're talking like 3 years old, 4 years old, right? Verbal problem solving, imagining futures that have never been and comparing them in your mind. By the time you've got that, you've got massive ability to solve problems, but you're also getting the voice within that will turn your life into a problem to be solved. And even little kids, 4-year-olds, if you show them the cartoon with Goofy's with horns is on one shoulder and Goofy with halos is on the other shoulder, they get it. That's how young you are. And by the way, by the time you're that old, suicide starts. Because you can imagine, the first book I wrote on ACT, after these almost 20 years of development, acceptance and commitment therapy, the stuff that the applied arm of this psychological flexibility journey, trying to figure out, this journey to figure out how language and cognition works, figure out how it then changes how normal processes work. At the very beginning of that book, I quoted the New York Times. It says, a 6-year-old child threw herself in front of a subway today and died. The authorities said her mother had died of a terminal illness. So you think about how old you have to be to do the most anti-life thing we know. And all you have to do is be able to imagine a future where your mama's not going to be there and you can be with her in heaven if you just die. And that's really, really young. Well, but my point being, once we get that dictator within going, which is great for doing your taxes, fixing your car, figuring out how to deal with a microphone that's not working, have a cell phone in your pocket. Science, we put it on steroids with science and technology, which is the product of the same thing. You look around the room, you'll see almost nothing that would be there without language and cognition. Almost nothing in your environment right now.
Right.
You got things that are made out of oil that you're sitting on, dirt that is ground up and melted that forms the structure of your chair. I mean, and our human prosperity goes up, goes up, goes up. Less violence, less poverty, less malnutrition right now on the planet than ever in the history of the world, of the universe, of the planet, right? Mm-hmm. If you get to pick a time to be born and you didn't know where, now's the time to pick it, right?
Yes.
And young people have more anxiety and stress now by a whole standard deviation they did 30 years ago. Suicide rates are up. Everything's going in the toilet. You can kind of look at the TV screen and you go like, oh God, man, the world's going in the wrong direction. And it is because we've turned our life over to this dictator within that evolved initially for cooperation, turned into problem solving. That's great. But then we've allowed it to become the dictator that tells us that our life can start when we earn the right to, it treats our life as a problem to be solved and feeds us the toxic triad of exposure to pain, exposure to judgment, and comparison between yourself and others, where you're always on the short end of the stick. I mean, your internal life never looks like the Instagrams that you see with other people's life. They're obviously doing better than you. You want to look at a billionaire's bathroom and see gold-plated toilet seats, you can do it. You know, so that toxic triad of pain, judgment, and comparison is just overwhelming us. And if we don't learn how to rein in this problem-solving mind, we're going to drown. I mean, these trends are just going to keep getting worse. We need modern minds for the modern world, and that's what this book's about.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I fully answered the question. I know I didn't, but it's in that space of how this mismatch, this new adaptation of symbolic language turning into problem solving can be reined in. And that's why, everybody's talking about mindfulness and all that kind of stuff, because we got to figure out a way forward that allows us to, see if somebody does something awful in the next minute, in the next 5 minutes, we can see the videos of it. Somebody threw their kids off a bridge. Somebody got gored by some plane flew into, it'll be here. You can watch the video of it.
Right.
That's new, man. When I was your age, they couldn't put pictures of dead soldiers in the New York Times from the Vietnam War. Do you know that? You were not allowed to print a picture of a dead soldier.
I had a rough
Now
idea.
you can watch people
Right.
live. In fact, they'll film it.
Right.
If
During
I'm
like
going
a
to go out
shooting.
and take everybody with me, I'll just stream it.
Right.
They'll take it down, but not fast enough that you can't.
Right.
So what are we going to do in that world? You better wake up and figure out a way to rein in your mind, or it's going to just strangle you with that combination.
I've noticed this a few themes you brought up here, but one of them is in this past, especially year, I've seen quite a few pieces of content or sometimes books or different speeches about the trend now. Like Instagram, for example, has reached its sort of like peak, and it's losing its flair, if you will, because
Yeah.
so many people will do this, scroll, feel bad about themselves, off they go. I noticed that when I started using it at the beginning, I didn't really connect with Instagram at the beginning, which actually was a good sign, I guess. But I was like, I don't know what I'm looking at. I still don't know what I'm looking at half the time because it doesn't look like reality outside when I go outside. This is not, I go outside, there's like a tree and a car, a park, I'm trying to park, I go to a place, and then I look on here and it looks like, I don't know what this is. So uh, I never got impacted highly by it, but I could always feel that certain people were being highly impacted, but they wouldn't say anything. It's sort of like when you say it, it's not an issue, but when you hide it, it actually was an issue that you were covering up and you're not saying anything. So I was always worried about them. So there's a few books, like Cal Newport has a digital minimalism book, or this guy Nir Eyal has an Indistractable about not being distracted by. It's becoming a theme because so many
Yeah.
people, they have their visions have been clouded. And one thing you mentioned there about the other voice, after I tutor students at times, and one of them, their parents, they have like a Buddhist meeting, so I started joining at times, and they talk about the transient voice. It's just there and like not giving it too much weight, which is kind of like, it's funny you mentioned kids at a certain age, they very quickly can understand that. That's interesting to find out.
Yeah. Yeah. I think what's going to happen, I hope, is that uh, with Western science, we can filter this thing out. What science is good at is there's stuff inside our wisdom traditions and so forth that we can use, but there's also a lot of woo woo and mumbo jumbo and stuff that's just not needed. And so, no, Buddha was not a scientist. Don't be telling me he's a
Right.
freaking scientist. I don't want to hear that. I mean, if people tell me that, and or whatever religious leader
Right.
you got or whatever. No,
Right.
but we can respectfully kind of pull these things at its joints
Mm-hmm.
and say, okay, well, what is the 20% that does the 80%? And put it into the culture. That's what I'm trying to be part of with this book, but not just the book. I've got a community of people who are working on this. That's about 8,500 people around the world, 28 chapters, blah, blah, blah. And it's not about me, me, me. What it's been about is how can we create a community that's chasing these processes and trying to figure them out and put them into normal people's lives. And what I think is going to happen is things like, take the Instagram thing, that people will be working a lot more with putting what's going on in their insides out so that you can see Like we have a thing that we do in ACT workshops where we have people dig down to a self-judgment that's really painful, that they're ready to let go of. Like I'm just sick and tired of being pushed around by this. Enough. I don't give a, this is it, right?
Hmm.
And maybe it's something like unlovable or liar or uh, fraud or uh, mean or something. And
Hmm.
there's a lot of them. But you pick one that you're really ready to let go of. Uh, this started with actually Robin Walser at the National Center for PTSD working with soldiers coming back, and what's showing up on their chest? Things like murderer. I mean, think about it. How are you going to carry that when you actually pulled the trigger and kids died in front of your eyes? Because we ask soldiers to do incredibly hard things sometimes. And well, so you can actually get kind of YouTube films of this. We write it on your chest on a thing, and you stick it on your chest. That word as a manifestation of I'm not letting that run me anymore.
Oh.
I get it. I have it. For the rest of my life, I'm going to be able to think it. Why? Because that's the way the mind works. There's no delete button in the nervous system. Anything you were ever told, heard, saw, whatever, there's no process called unlearning. If you take psych, you say, where's the unlearning process? These are learning processes. There isn't one. You can have inhibition processes like extinction, but you can learn it again faster, which means it's still there. So, that once in. That's the way the nervous system works. It's short of brain injury. Or as the joke goes, a frontal lobotomy or a bottle in front of me. I mean, you can create physiological conditions where you can get stupid, but it's not in your interest. And the nervous system is not really interested in doing that because you survive better if you can respond to your experience in the past. So you're carrying all this shit.
Hmm.
Well, you walk around and you look at people's tags the way we do it. You're not allowed to comment on it for like an hour.
Oh.
And every one of these freaking tags you could have put on yourself. So people are walking inside these painful, painful wagging fingers of shame and blame secrets. And the big joke is they're all the freaking same secrets. But we don't put our insides out. And you don't see that on the Instagrams. And so what do you feel? You feel like you're the one left out. You're the one behind the door when the goodies were passed out. You were the loser. You're the one who got the short end of it. And it's actually, no, you're a human being. And people are lying to you by omission, not on purpose. They're not trying to hurt you. They're trying to protect themselves. And in so doing, they're making a social world that's harder to be whole and free. And could we flip that around? Can be a little wiser? Can we start deliberately creating opportunities to create a more flexible, kind, compassionate, values-based world? And I think the answer is yes. We're going to do it. We're going to figure it out. Or the world will just burn up as it goes into a gazillion degrees or whatever's going to happen. But we're on lots of trajectories that could be really bad if we don't learn how to come together in consciousness and be wiser. And you need the psychologists at the table, not putting people into some sort of syndromal thing, you're mentally ill, not that. What are the processes that liberate human lives? That's what's in the book. That's a 40-year science journey. And I think I can tell you at least the best vetted so far scientific answer to that, the smallest set that does the most. That's called the psychological flexibility processes that are talked about in the Liberated Mind.
Hmm. It's like a bit of entrapment, if you will. And yes, the lying by omission, by the way, I highly identify with that. I've always noticed that most of the content that has had a negative impact on people's well-being, you know, I would like to see the 4 hours of filming before and after the content. Like, show me that person's whole day. Show me that. That's why, like, if I met somebody, show me all your text messages and stuff. I want to see. I'm not judging. Let's look at the whole thing. Oh, wait a minute. There wasn't some big scenario that was so different out there. It made it seem like that because you just chopped off the little part. It's like there's a cake and there's a little bit of cream and a cherry on top. Chop off the cake. Here's the thing, and everything looks like that all the time. I guess you're gonna start thinking that's reality in some form, but they kept cropping, stop cropping everything, I guess.
That's awesome. And actually, we started spontaneously even before I know what we're doing here, talking about, expertise and stuff like that. That's another example, because people write these stories, these success stories, and they look like overnight success. And, I've got a 14-year-old my youngest, my oldest is turning 50. I've been doing this for a long time, but I've had kids in the home for 55 years by the time he goes to college. But he's talking to me about YouTubers and what they did, and they instantly made this amount of money, and blah blah blah. And I'm going, dude, wait a minute. And I've noticed just in the last year, his mind is shifting, and he's starting to dig in. He's starting to realize, oh, how much work it took to put people for them. And occasionally things just happen. Yeah, miracles happen, but to put yourself in a place where you can succeed. And he's starting to dig into the studies in a different way. I can just sort of see it, where it's sort of settling in. And it's the same kind of thing, that could we, if I use the example just out of the science side,
Mm-hmm.
a guy who's dead now is a student of B.F. Skinner's, Og Lindsay, crazy old coot. I love the guy. And he did a study showing that you can learn while you're asleep. And it was so cool because, learning without awareness and stuff like that, you kind of know it. I mean, you're responding to your environment when you're asleep. I mean, if you've ever wake up, sometimes you realize noise in the background caused that dream, blah, 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 etc. Well, so he has this really cool study. It publishes in Science magazine, the highest impact science journal in the
Right.
world. This
Mm-hmm.
is like 40 years ago. And he wanted to write it this way. Here's how this actually happened. I was working on my apparatus and I fell asleep. And then when I woke up, it turned out that I was actually learning while I was asleep, and science would not let him do that. They made him put in a hypothesis. My hypothesis was, because that's freaking science. In other words, you're going to tell young scientists that, oh, I've got an idea that would test learning without awareness. I will test subjects as they go to sleep while they're working on my apparatus. No, that's a lie.
Mm-hmm.
That's not how that happened. It was
Right.
serendipity is how that happened. Skinner, B.F. Skinner, the rats and pigeons, I don't know if you know he was into it, but
Mm-hmm.
his early work on extinction was done because the food apparatus on his apparatus broke down. And then he comes in and he's looking at this cumulative record, the record of what the animals did, and he said, oh, look at that, it's different. And if God bless him, he wrote it up that way. My equipment broke.
Mm-hmm.
And here's what happened. It wasn't like, I have a hypothesis. So the kids are being lied to constantly.
Yeah.
And then they're wondering, like, when am I going to get my inspiration? When am I going to get my brilliant idea? Dude, that's not how it happened in the first place. People were out there learning and having all these other things, and then things combine. Brand new ideas don't happen out of nothing. They happen out of combination of these little bits of things that you learn from all these kind of places. If you're interested, you're exploring, you're pushing out the boundaries, you're creating an opportunity for those little seeds to grow. But if you wait for the gods to touch your, you're going to be my age and you're still waiting. So I don't know. There's something in just the way we are as human beings that feed this, and it made it much worse in the Instagram world. Now we can really pretend and put on the mask and the clown suit and pretend that we're however we want to pretend to be. The word for personality comes from a Greek word that was a clay mask that you'd put on when you played roles in Greek theater.
Oh, like a persona.
Yeah, a persona, a clay mask. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's what we do. We put on or
Right.
frowny face or a happy face. And people don't get to see the real process of how human lives evolve. I try to walk through some of this, and some of that I tell my own story of my own panic disorder and things like that, just so that people can relate to, oh, that's how that works. Sometimes you find good ideas only when you hit bottom, things like that.
Mm-hmm. I've noticed that I always take into account I call it like a combinatorial effect. That's how things are made. They don't just generate from one thing. They're like, you thought of this thing happened, you were there. And then you can pretend to take credit so much, like, look what I amazing did. But maybe it was just the circumstances in your form, you saw it. And then later on, you can just cover up, you can pull the carpet or whatever that phrase is. And now you can present it to people like, well, this is why I'm number one in this category because of this and all this.
Exactly.
And they don't see the
Well,
thing.
it's almost always an ego-based story. You kind of you admit the process. Sometimes you don't know the process. That's to be fair, but you even admit the parts that you do know, and then you come up with a long paragraph that has the word "I" in it about 10 times.
Yeah. And then
Lots of content, but really what's going on there, dude? You're climbing inside this ego-based conceptualized self and pretending that's you. And of course you came up with this brilliant idea because you're so great and you're so grand, you know.
and not only do you not connect with it, you know it's kind of a false thing you're creating, but nobody connects. You basically created something that was it's over there. You basically like you built a pyramid, it goes and sits over there. You're not connecting with it. Other people, they don't know what to take from it other than he's amazing, she's amazing. I don't know.
Yeah,
It's
you don't know
great.
how to apply it to yourself. Well, in a liberated mind, that you mentioned the subtitle, how to pivot towards what matters. That
Mm-hmm.
metaphor of a pivot. This is the first ACT book where I really kind of developed this thing out. The metaphor is like you take energy that's going in one direction and you put it in another direction. Like a pivot is like a hinge. It's a French word for that part of the hinge where if you want the door to go that way, you have to push it that way. Right. So you got these things going on in your life that are going actually in a negative direction. But what I try to do in the liberated mind is walk inside the big six. There's 6 things we do that are really pathological, and they're paired up with 6 things that we can learn how to do that are really helpful.
Mm-hmm.
And they predict. I mean, we've done the work. Like we've studies with like 10,000 people followed over 5 to 10 years. I mean, they just predict massively which way your life is gonna go. But what's they're in these pairs. But what's cool about it is the energy inside the negative one and the positive one are the same energy. And so right if you slow down and you notice what's screwing you up, it's not because you're there's something wrong with you. You actually you have the right issue going on there, but you're channeling it in the wrong direction. And so to connect with what you're just saying, why do we get into this I'm great. Why do we lie so much? Why? Because we want to belong. We want to belong. We're the social monkeys. And, if you look at a baby, you just look in its eyes, brand new, neonate. I mean, jump out of the womb, look at the baby. The baby starts dumping natural opiates in its brain. Just we are so, and we got whites around our eyes so we can even see it. The other primates don't. So you can see where mama's looking. When mama looks at their sweet baby, you're like, The only creatures on the planet that do it, by the way, are dogs, and it's between the two of us, not between
Right.
them. Yeah, and we kind of evolved them to do that because they got to follow our intentions. So we actually kind of program that in over the 12,000 years that we've been working out together, us and dogs. But going back to it, so if you look at like this, I'm special kind of thing. Do other people feel especially connected to you, uplifted and empowered by you when you do that? No. Have you ever been around a narcissist? Do you feel especially connected to that person? No. I'm great. I'm grand. I'm the best. You really need me. Look at all the wonderful things. Do you feel connected to them? You don't.
Yeah.
Because the message is, I'm different than you. I'm better than you. That's why you need me. Or, oh, I'm depressed. My abuse history. I get it. I'm a psychologist. I care about pain, but don't climb in that as a clown suit. That's another way to belong, where people within the first conversation want to tell you the string of mental illnesses some freaking shrink has tagged them with. And we'll get accommodations because I have this long list. I mean, come on, what are we doing? That's not real either. And that's more like, let me in. I'm so needy. But my point is, what's underneath these two things is this yearning to belong. So what's in a liberated mind is that I say, okay, how do you actually belong? How do you actually create that? And it's in consciousness, sharing values and vulnerabilities. You think about who you feel especially connected to, who you genuinely want to be a friend with, or when you have a real friend or a lover, a really special one, what happens? You're connected in consciousness. When you're together, you're together. You can look at each other and you know. And you share what's painful and difficult, and you share what you deeply care about. They know you from the inside. Yeah. That's not a clown suit. And it's neither needy nor great and grand. It's human. And what I try to do in a liberated mind is show how we can get there. How can we create a cultural context, but also psychological context where it's safe to get out of the clown suit, show up as a whole conscious being, make room for your history, your difficult thoughts and feelings, come into the present and remember or connect with what you care about, what brings vitality, meaning, purpose to your life, and then organize your behavior around that. And now we're back to the how to learn how to play guitar. Now we've got an engine of being more and more and more who you came to be, and allowing yourself to have aspirations and inspirations and to become expert, if that's what you're into, in the areas that really uplift you. Not because somebody else said you're supposed to be like this, or because your mind's telling you otherwise, that means this about you, etc. Not all these kind of pokes and prods and wagging fingers. That doesn't lift you up. That doesn't move you forward. So what I've just done, if I did it in slow motion, is all 6 flexibility processes. They're all in that paragraph if we unpacked them. But this example of belonging leading to the conceptualized self, and instead taking the energy and coming into this kind of interconnected sense of consciousness in which these other flexibility processes are possible. That's kind of an example of what I try to do in a liberated mind and share what 40 years of research by several thousand people can produce. It's not me, it's a whole community, but I'm channeling it because I'm able to, because the cultural gatekeepers will let you publish a book at a certain level, because they'll invest the money and gamble, and they'll see if they make their money back. But meanwhile, I've got a book where I can maybe share what the community did.
Mm-hmm. I noticed there's so many topics, but one I want to is I going back to what you said way earlier about like when you're looking at what to even research, you looked at what can you bring to the table, which is your special category. That's a nice feature because the stuff that somebody else could bring or it's not your forte, somebody else could do that. It's not for you. You have your own. This is I feel this. This is what I resonate with. That's a nice feature. And when you're doing that thing, there isn't so much ego or so much you don't need. It's just I'm fit. I'm being fulfilled by what I'm doing. I'm not like because when you're needy, you're actually unfulfilled, and then ego is like you're trying to make something from nothing. Like look at what I did, but it's not for you. So I noticed those kinds of elements connect.
I like the way you're talking. I mean, it really is right on to what I know of the science of it. What you're saying right now is right on. I mean, scientists, different ones will have different terms for it, but the core of what you're saying is right on. And so how do we put that into our hearts first, my way of thinking, and then heads and hands second? So how do we actually connect with that space in which what you're saying becomes of importance? Sometimes the way in is pain. People get beat up enough by trying to make the clown suit work, and you get another relationship gets trashed, or you get all this even wonderful outcomes, but you feel empty, or you find yourself doing something, you're forcing yourself constantly to do it because you're supposed to care about it, but you really don't. It's just that's painful. All those kinds of things, and that's what it took for me. I mean, I tell that story in the book, but sometimes other people can be guided just by sweet moments, by really being able to read what really brings vitality to your life. And if you really chase that, I don't mean the sugar rush. I mean real vitality. I mean eyes open, in the morning, ready to go. It feels uplifting, connected, rich, uh, right,
High
not right,
bandwidth.
judgmental right, but true, or what apt, fitted. I mean, there's not even good words for it. You chase that, and you'll find these same processes I'm talking about in the book in there. Because people have been doing this for millennia. It's just the cool thing science can do is it can kind of E equals MC squared. It's a kind of really big, broad, general thing. It applies to a lot of things, but it's really specific. Man, you can measure the bending of the curvature of light around a gravitational object. There's nothing like that in behavioral science, but the closest are things like reinforcement principles, stuff like that. And maybe some things have to do with how the brain works. In terms of how language works, cognition works, boy, this sounds prideful, but I think this is one of the best attempts out there. And it's because we've spent a lot of time slogging through, what is that 12-month-old baby doing? How does that scale to what you and I are doing right now? And then how can we put that into our lives in a way that we are uplifted by our psychological processes, and it can extend out to social processes and taking care of our own physical health and so forth, that all these things that are of importance can be empowered by getting your mind right.
That makes sense. I like that you handle so many different categories in the book as well, the difficulty or whatnot, challenge. What I like to always conclude with, close with, put together with is, if you had a message for all people of the earth, you had like a megaphone and it was a one-sentence message, what would be a message you would say to everybody that represents something about who you are or what you would want them to know?
Well, really, I think we're on a journey to put love in the world, but in the modern world, I think we need to learn kind of how to do that. And so part of what I think I would say is your mind is not your friend, but it's not your enemy. There's more to you than just that judgmental part of you. And it's worth taking time to attend to your own thoughts, feelings, memories, and bodily sensations in a way that allow you to learn, but allow you to not be entangled by that. And then consciously show up here in the present moment and kind of wake up to what you deeply care about and put your life's energy, the actual behavior, what you would do with your feet, put that to what you care about, not what your mama says you have to care about, or what some book says you should care about, or you'd otherwise feel guilty if. No, gut check time. What between you and the person in the mirror? What are the qualities that are reflected? Maybe in your heroes, maybe in your sweet moments, maybe underneath your pain when you flip it over. Why is that so painful? Because you care about something, because you wanted something. Okay, well, what is it? Let's put that. And if you could distill that all down, it would be something like, let's learn how to be here whole and free, and to love ourselves and each other, and create a world in which that can be more of the theme than what we see on these computers in our pocket.
That, that is a wonderful message. I always resonate with parts of it. I look at as you're describing it, I'm thinking of parts of it that connect with me. That's cool. Professor Hayes, I would like to thank you for having been on episode 230 of the show. This has been wonderful. Frankly, I'm going to watch it back just to pick up on things from my own existence, to understand them a little bit better. Author of A Liberated Mind, How to Pivot Toward What Matters, and countless publications across the board. When you have a category and you hit it from many different angles, then you are the person. There is no competition in that realm. You're the person for that. Glad to have had you on the show.
Awesome to be here with you. This is a playful, fun romp, and I hope people can actually take of it something that's of use.
This is true. And we are out.